Hello, everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Art. My name is Mindy Pitzner. I am currently an adjunct professor here at Crown. This is actually my second semester teaching, last semester being Drawing 1. I am currently in the glamorous city of Biloxi, Mississippi for some training regarding my full-time work. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we do sort of a syllabus plus a little bit of lecture here towards the end online, but I look forward to seeing you all in person next week. This slide is just an agenda for what I'll be going through in this recorded talk, but just so you know, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to shoot me a message via email. I'll reiterate this at the end as well, but otherwise I'll be able to answer any questions when we get together next week. Again, a formal introduction. My name is Mindy Pitzner. You are welcome to call me Mindy, Mrs. Pitzner, Professor Pitzner, whatever you are comfortable with, as long as it is coming from a place of respect. You will learn this about me throughout the semester, but really when it comes to how we treat each other and our expectations, I am happy to treat you as adults as long as that respect is reciprocated. So a little bit more about my background. So I've been a studio artist for about 9 years now. I have a bachelor's in studio art, art history, and arts administration from Bethany Lutheran College. I graduated in 2021. I also have a master's of arts in arts administration and management from Southern Utah University that I graduated in 2024. When it comes to my art in particular, I really love oil paint, which we'll learn about in class. I also use charcoal, pastel, and pencil for portraits and stuff too. I do have a website listed there. I'm not going to dig too deep into it, but if you want to check out my portfolio, it's there. Regarding my full-time work, I work in a finance office for the Minnesota Air National Guard. It is a very unique mix between the creative art side, and then I also work in a finance office doing budgeting and accounting, which is very right brain, left brain. But I find the mix fulfilling. It's interesting in its own ways for sure. Regarding my employment, I am happy to answer questions as long as, it's sort of in that free time, but I'm not going to dig too deep in that otherwise. I live in the Twin Cities, Brooklyn Park area with my husband, who is pictured here with me, and there's our son as well, who's almost a year and a half. We also have a dog and 2 cats. This is just a quick snapshot from my website with some of my work. I do a lot of oil painting, and in particular, I'm a big fan of waterfalls. So if you know of any cool waterfalls that would be kind of cool to explore or hike around, please let me know. So the nitty-gritty syllabus portion, as you can see, there's a lot of words up there, and I'm not going to sit and read the entire syllabus to you because that would be really boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some things, but I really encourage you to take the time to read through it. It does give some descriptions of projects and that kind of stuff, which we'll get into in this lecture, but read through it. Let me know if you have any questions. But the big thing is, why are we here? We're here to learn about art. We'll learn about art in lots of different ways throughout the semester. And the biggest thing is we're going to be doing both the hands-on practical piece as well as the art history. So I'm excited to dig into that with you guys. A couple of the policy things I just want to highlight, and a lot of it is repeated with other classes. So again, I'm not going to read word from word, but I hope you understand that the same, academic dishonesty policy regarding Crown and how they react to cheating or plagiarism, fabrication, understand the consequences of that. Understanding mental health is very important. So if you are struggling with anything in personal or particular, please don't hesitate to. You don't necessarily have to tell me everything. I mean, I'm definitely here to listen, but reach out to me, reach out to a friend. There's other resources on campus to get the help that you need. That is super duper important. Regarding course-specific policies, so my attendance policy is that you have up to 3 hours of unexcused absences that you can essentially miss one day of class without an applicable excuse, whether that's sports events or you're sick, and it won't impact your grade. Anything past those 3 hours may impact your essentially cumulative grade. Please shoot me emails as soon as you know you were sick or you know you have an event. Communication is definitely key when it comes to your participation grade as well as your grade as a whole and this attendance policy. Regarding assignments, late projects will receive a full letter grade deduction for every day, which in reality is a week, class to class, every day that's missed submitting in your work. Again, communication is key. So if there is real life that is impacting your school life, please let me know, and I am happy to work with you. Again, communicate. The best way to reach me is probably email. Otherwise, I do get messages in Canvas as well, but email is definitely the best. And then just in general, when we're creating art, it's important that when we're picking reference material, that if it's of somebody else, we get permission. We want to show love and respect as we create our artwork, just as we would throughout our lives. When it comes to creating our artwork, we're going to be doing a lot of work in class, as well as there's going to be expectation that you are finishing it or completing it partially outside of class. So keep that in mind. In addition to studying or memorizing, not necessarily memorizing, I will get into that later, but the content as well as the projects themselves, understand that you will have homework outside of class. And then I'm going to hit on it again, communication. Please let me know if you have stuff going on. I'm happy to work with you. In the syllabus, it goes through the goals for this class. I am just as much invested in as you should be in achieving those goals. So I am happy and here to be a resource towards those goals. So each class that we have together is going to be split up into 2 parts. The first part is going to be primarily lecture, which will most likely be art history. And you can see that when you look at the schedule laid out in the syllabus, but it'll be art history or art theory, depending on what we're talking about. And that lecture will include testable material. So vocab words, concepts, things like that you will want to be taking notes in order to be prepared for the midterm as well as the final exam as well. And then part 2 might have a little bit of lecture, mostly through like demonstration and that kind of stuff, but it's primarily going to be the hands-on application of the concepts that we learn. So your art supplies, which were listed in the supply section of the syllabus, will be needed especially for this section. If you don't have the supplies, I will be sending you back to your room to get your supplies, and it will impact your participation grade in class. Again, we will be completing our projects in as well as outside of class. But I will do my best to give you as much time as possible, just depending on how the lectures go. For the sake of clarity, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the supplies list in the syllabus for your information, and that way we're all on the same page. So the first part is probably the most straightforward part, note-taking materials. I do recommend using pen and paper just for memorization and repetition. Scientifically, writing stuff down is better for your memory rather than typing things out, because we can pretty mindlessly listen to things and type things out. But I'm not going to require anything. Again, you are adults and you can make the decision for yourself. If you're not familiar with drawing pencils themselves, in general, when you purchase them in a pack, you get a range of light to hard lead pencils, which really just gives you versatility when it comes to doing light versus dark shading. And we'll get into that more when we talk about it in class, but I just wanted to point out specifically, don't get the biggest pack out there. Really, 4 to 5 pencils with a range of H2, HB, and then maybe like a B2 to B4. A lot of those letters and numbers probably might not have made the whole sense, but really, as long as you follow the link in the syllabus and get that smaller pack, you should be set for class. And then when it comes to the erasers, I listed 2 really, really good options. The high polymer eraser is just gonna be kind of like your standard eraser, where you get the little bits everywhere, which is totally fine. But a personal preference when it comes to erasers is the putty eraser, which In reality, erases probably just as well as the polymer. It's a self-cleaning eraser, so when you get it all full of graphite or even like pastel, you can clean it. But really, both of those would be great options. And then something just to draw on for class. It's pretty straightforward. 18 by 24 inches. Yes, specifically that size. We want that big drawing pad, and specifically drawing or sketch paper will work really well. Really watch out though, there's also a type of paper called newsprint. It's essentially a really cheap recycled paper that's used for really like throwaway practice sketches. I don't want you to get that. It will like look like a good option outright because it is a lot cheaper, but that's because it's not quality paper and it's not meant to be. So just stick to drawing or sketch. Conte crayon is a bit of a unique drawing supply. It's probably the one you're least familiar with, but really what it is a really hard type of pastel. It's really good for sketching. It can be a little tricky to find online, but the link I provided in the syllabus should be good. Otherwise, Hobby Lobby, and actually Hobby Lobby does have pretty much all of these supplies, so if you would prefer to purchase in person, that would be a good option too. But make sure you have at least 2 sticks in either red or the black. I would recommend the red just personally, but either would totally work. And then the last 2 supplies are probably the most straightforward, but a really good quality roller style black pen and then a straight edge ruler. I recommend the metal one in particular because it's really good quality, gets you nice clean edges, and then that cork backing just allows it to not stick and slide around your paper. So there are 2 major projects that you'll have throughout the semester. One is written and then one is a studio art project. The first of which is your art exhibit report. So this is one is especially important to plan ahead throughout the semester. Essentially what will happen is all of you will be required to attend an art exhibit or presentation, either online or in person. Now, I personally think that attending in person is probably the most beneficial and potentially even easier when it comes to writing this report, but I understand that there are limitations and other logistics requirements, so online is a perfectly acceptable option as well. The biggest thing is you'll attend the event, listen to ideally a Minnesota artist, or it might be from out of state. I think I referenced Minnesotan artist in the questionnaires, but that's not necessarily a requirement of the assignment. And you will take notes, listen to their story, and then observe their artwork. From there, you will find a piece of artwork from that show in particular that might have catch your eye for some reason, or maybe you think it's the worst one, maybe you think it's the best one. If anything, you pick a piece of artwork and you will also do sort of a little questionnaire on that as well. In Canvas, I have sort of that screenshot is from Canvas. I have that little description and then 2 attachments, one of which is the instructions and questionnaire. So that gives you detailed step-by-step instructions on what you will be doing for the project, as well as a lineup of questions that prompt you for the information I'm looking for in the report. When it comes to formatting and that kind of stuff, I want your opinion, your perspective. So you will be writing in the second person, using I and me. And the formality isn't overly important. Really, it's the content. I want you to go or view and experience the event and then provide that information back to me as if I wasn't there, which I wasn't. But with that questionnaire, it has all the information you need. I highly recommend you do your research now. Either find event you want to go see in person or find the one you want to see online. I am also open to you finding past recorded art exhibit events. That is totally fine, as long as you can listen to the artist presentation as well as be able to view their artwork. So there are specific like recommendations and that kind of stuff in the instructions. Definitely dig deep, and I'll answer any questions you have next week as well. But that is your meat and potatoes for your art exhibit report. One last note on the art exhibit report is that it will be due before, or actually on exam day at midnight. So you have the entire semester to work on this paper, and you're welcome to hand it in early if you get it done early, but don't forget about it. That'll be the most important thing. If you find an event and you're not sure if it qualifies for the assignment, shoot me an email, send me the link, send me the information, and I will be able to give you the thumbs up or not. Part 2 of the major projects for this semester will be the final art project, which has 2 options. 1, you can complete an original piece of artwork, or 2, complete a master copy. An original artwork would really just be anything you want to do. You can pick what it is, what it's made out of, whether it's digital or physical. As long as it is something we can present in class in some way, you will most likely be okay to do it. About, I think, halfway through the semester, you'll be required to submit a proposal, a written proposal describing like what you want to do, what you want to make it out of. And there I will either give you the thumbs up, ask you questions, or maybe we workshop more ideas. But otherwise, it's an original work. Part 2, or option 2, is a master copy, which really is just going back in art history, which can be more recent or even later, finding a master work, which we'll talk a little bit about what constitutes that here in a little bit, and doing a copy in order to study it. So here we are picking a masterwork in order to emulate certain aspects that show great skill, good craft, really good execution of various visual art concepts and that kind of stuff. With that particular option, you will also be required to write an informative description as to why that piece is considered a masterpiece and worth studying. So you need to justify why you studied this piece of work. That written blip will be presented when we go through all of our final projects as a class. We'll sort of do our own mini gallery, walk around together, and discuss and observe what we created over the semester. So that is all I have for you regarding the syllabus, our course structure, and a bit about those big projects that I want you to be starting to think about now. Now into the good stuff. What are we doing here? Why are we here? Why is this important? What is art? So the actual textbook of art in general is pretty flimsy, a little bit messy. There's a very big subjective component to it, and you'll see that when you really talk to anybody with art. But in general, art is the visual embodiment of a culture's prevailing philosophies. So as humans, we have thoughts, we have ideas, we experience things, we have feelings, we have emotions, and art is one of those really powerful and engaging and accessible ways that we can communicate that, express that, present that to other groups of people that aren't like us. It's a way for us to learn about them. The sharing of one's imagination. We have all these visions, these pictures in our head, things that we feel, we see, that we want to share. So we make them physical and we share them. Aesthetics is a big part of it. A lot of sort of philosophical questions around art, especially when you talk about what is good art. A lot of times you kind of slide into this discussion about aesthetics, about what looks good, what is beauty. Does art need to be beautiful to make it good, to make it bad? All of these what if questions that can be very subjective, which means the discussion can really go on forever. It is visual communication. I kind of touched on that a little bit. But all in all, it is very difficult to define distinctly and have everybody completely agree about that definition. And that's okay. It's a little chaotic. If you're used to subject matters like science and math where things are very concrete and that kind of stuff, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but it's okay. Everybody has their own relationship with art. They have their own understanding of art. The biggest thing, and you'll find this a lot as I present a lot of things to you this semester, is to have an open mind and be perceptive to potentially changing how you understand art based on like what you view and what other people share and that kind of stuff. The best way to not really understand art is to close your box of understanding of what it is. And I'm trying my best to not get too like woo woo right out the bat, but it really is the truth. It is extremely subjective. One of the first sort of, knock on the wall vocab words when it comes to how we talk about art is the concept of abstraction. So every piece of artwork created lies somewhere on this scale of representational artwork and totally abstract artwork. Representational artwork is, I'm trying not to use the word in the definition, but essentially it is artwork created to look like how we see the world. So a good example, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. It is a portrait of a woman. It looks like a woman, a realistic woman even. There are some stylistic aspects of the portrait that tie heavily to that Renaissance era. But when you look at it, your brain immediately goes, that's a woman. That is a picture of a woman. Now on the other spectrum, we have total abstraction, which the example is right there, Woman in an Armchair, Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso was a very famous Cubist artist. Cubism, which we'll touch on way at the end of the semester, it was an artistic movement that essentially took objects in our world and made them very geometric, stylized pattern, very much what you see in that portrait there. And that is what we would call total abstraction. Now, when you look at it for more than 2 seconds, you can see the woman. You see there's a head, there's hair, she has shoulders and arms and a torso, and she's sitting on a chair, and you see it behind her. But it's not representational of how we see a real woman in real life. It's helpful to know sort of that spectrum there, especially how we see how fine art progresses through art history. But it's just a concept to keep in mind as we look at more art. Another really good question to ask when it comes to understanding why we're even in this class is, why is art? Why does art get created? So like we kind of touched on at that first slide, artists react to the culture and prevailing thoughts around them. So you can either be for, against, or somewhere in the middle. But either way, why we create artwork, it ends up a lot of times being in a reaction to something that's happened around us. Big picture, little picture, very personal, very abstract. It's very personal, extremely personal. Again, communication. So like poetry, its rules are flexible. And we'll learn this as we go through art history. A lot of fine art, especially once it became institutionalized, had a lot of rules made up for it. And we can talk forever about how like society builds up those structures and how they get broken and that kind of stuff. But that is the same when it comes to art. They're like, some people can say that there are rules with art, but in reality, people can make anything. And that can be sometimes a scary thing. Sometimes that's an amazing thing. And that is sort of the up and down roller coaster when it comes to creating artwork. I like this, to try to make sense of ourselves and our universe. I connect pretty strongly to this statement. I found artwork to become a very big part of my life really not until college. And it took some very influential people around me to kind of be encouraged and emboldened to have that be so. But for me as well, I'll even add, creating artwork can be a form of worship. I find creating, just kind of like what the syllabus says at the bottom there, I create because I was created by a perfect creator. And that connection for me is very strong when it comes to motivations. And I again, very personal, could be the same for you in the future or even right now. But finding yourself, finding what you believe in can all be explored through creating artwork. And then for the artist, the impulse is like sharing a good joke. The process reinforces and encourages itself. So when you think of a really funny joke and you say the joke and everybody laughs, that encouragement, that response keeps you going, keeps you thinking of more funny things to say, being creative in that way. And that's the same with art. Like the interaction of people viewing artwork, giving feedback, that kind of stuff, that feeds that sort of cycle when it comes to creating artwork. And then why is art? It's just kind of cool. There are just cool aspects of it. Sometimes it's because the art world is seen as elitist, which I'd argue is not the healthiest way for it to be. But there are definitely aspects of it that are considered cool, whether that's because it's unattainable or unique or interesting to look at. It just kind of has that. And we see that in pop culture too. But I think a lot of us experience that. I remember when I was, I had to have been like 8 or 10. And I remember seeing like the cool art girl, in the movies and that kind of stuff. And the outsider that finds herself, and that sort of like adventure story being interesting as a 10-year-old. And so that inherent quality of artwork is there. Wanting to illustrate sort of that connection of an artwork to that artist's why question, I wanted to show a couple of examples here. First of which is probably pretty recognizable. It's Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, which is probably arguably one of the most recognizable piece of artwork that are out there today. Ultimately, Van Gogh himself, when he was alive, was not a very successful artist. He is pretty well known as sort of that tortured artist. He struggled with a lot of mental illness issues throughout his life, alcoholism, poverty, all of that mixed together. Does not build a very supported life. But when it came to his artwork specifically, he was very known for emotional expression, spiritual expression, and that shows in his artwork. So his pieces are more about what he sees, what he is experiencing, what he is feeling when he is looking at these scenes. He painted a lot of interior scenes, exterior scenes, wheat fields, sunflowers. But ultimately, this one in particular, the Starry Night, was actually done from memory, which even leans into more that emotional, spiritual expression that comes with him remembering the scene and then painting it. He used a lot of very thick paint, a lot of thick brushstrokes, and the arrangement and the balance of this painting in particular, in contrast with sort of like the chaotic movement that you have with all of the swirls and the circles and the brushstrokes, it makes it compelling. It's interesting to look at. There is emotional expression there. Jackson Pollock is another interesting artist from the mid 1900s, so like 1940s, 1950s, especially when we consider the context of his life and his background and how that informs his artwork. So himself, he had a pretty traumatic childhood. His father abandoned his family when he was younger. He battled with alcoholism, as well as the general mental health struggles that come with managing addiction and that kind of stuff. He was encouraged to create artwork through a part of his treatments when he went to rehab, I believe several times, which helped kind of guide the creative process. But he did a lot of formal studying with other artists in America, different schools. He jumped around working with different art galleries to create his work. But the main thing, I guess, when you look at this piece and that kind of stuff, and you try to analyze what you're looking at, understanding the context of his life and how his art style specifically develops kind of informs you why it was made, and does inform you what expression you're looking at. Without any context, you walk up to this painting, and a lot of people can have different reactions just depending on your personal feelings, the current state you're in. Some observers see it as freeing, like the dynamic movements and the swirls and all that kind of stuff. It makes them feel free, while other people interpret that as sort of entrapment and anxiety and, overstimulation and that kind of stuff. So having that context allows you to better understand the artist, better understand their work, but then ultimately, like, what you take away and the value you take away from looking at a piece like this is up to you. I'm just saying that context can kind of help guide that or change that for you. So the next big question, what is good art? Again, another very hard question, not meant to trick you or anything. But keep in mind, as we look at a ton of art this semester, I want you to remember this. Making something creative can be really hard to do, but making something that is creative and good is harder still. So as we evaluate artwork for its quality, there's a lot of different sort of criteria that you will decide in your head quickly, and then there's also certain things you should take some time to decide. There's questions like, do I like it? Does it look good? Do I think it looks good? Is it my personal aesthetic? Does it have a good message? Is it something that is compelling to me? But then there's also sort of more of the academic view where you look at the craftsmanship. Is it done well? Is the concept thought through? Do I find that there's quality both in the message as well as the craftsmanship when it comes to the artwork? All very important components when it comes to evaluating artwork. Before we continue, one sort of important distinction I'd like to make, especially when we choose our words and how we talk about art, is the difference between art and craft. Now, arts and crafts, often gets mushed together, which I think is a common reason why there's this misconception that fine art is separated from craft. But down to its simplest forms, the difference between art and craft. Art is unpredictable. It takes talent and attempts the impossible. The parameters are open. The medium options, medium just means it's the type of material you use to create artwork. So the medium options are unlimited. There is no book. You do it, and it's unpredictable and impossible. And you attempt to make the impossible. Crafts is predictable. It takes aptitude, really just the ability to read instructions, and it attempts the possible. You get instructions, you are given materials, and you craft the item based off of those two things. So, and not that both, or one has value and one doesn't, but I think it's an important distinction between the two. If you don't understand art, a lot of times they mush together, and it does remove some credibility from artwork. And so it's just important to kind of understand what those two things are. So continuing the conversation about what is good art, when you break down art into components, and I'm going to foot stomp this because this will be important as we continue discussions throughout the semester. Art equals form plus content. Form on its own is the mastery over the formal element. So being able to skillfully use a material to make it look like something. This semester we'll be talking about the use of perspective, light and shadow, color theory, all of these like formal components. If you show a mastery over those different formal elements, that is the form component of your piece. So, you draw a cityscape and you demonstrate that you have a clear understanding of perspective. Like it looks accurate, it has depth, that kind of a thing. Content is the conceptual sophistication. Does it mean something? So is there sophisticated value within whatever image or physical form, whatever you've created. Without one or the other, if you have good form but no content, it's boring. If you have all content but no form, it doesn't look good. It doesn't it's not compelling. It doesn't establish a credibility. And so when we keep those two components in mind, that leads us to our discussion about what is a masterpiece. So good art has form and content. What is a masterpiece? We ask these two questions. Does it stand the test of time? And does it move people or connect on an emotional level? That first one, the stand the test of time, is important. I would say most of the stuff we'll be viewing over the semester could be considered masterpieces, whether it's for its form, for its content, or both. But the fact that they have stayed prominent pieces of artwork over time is significant. That means there is something connecting us as viewers today to the people in art history who created the work and viewed it then as well. There's that connection, and that's powerful, and kind of fun to think about, having that connection to people back in history. And then, does it move people, connect on an emotional level? Yes, and it should, because that is what allows it to stand the test of time. So that's sort of, when you view something and you want to consider it a masterpiece or not, those are the questions that you ask. Continuing the discussion on sort of the master artist, understanding what that means, I want to touch on two artists, first of which is Michelangelo, which you probably recognize some of the pieces on the screen here. He was a Renaissance sculptor, painter, and architect. He was well known for his psychological intensity, emotional realism in his work, and what I like to emphasize is the fact that he both had the incredible skill and craftsmanship with a lot of mediums when it came to creating artwork, as well as dramatic storytelling, which the prominence of his skill, so even just like with his sculpture and his stonework, and then the images themselves, how powerful they are, have survived over time and are still considered incredible pieces of artwork. So they are considered masterworks. Another artistic theme that I want to put out there for us as a class, especially looking at Michelangelo and his work, is the subject matter of the human body as an artistic theme. So the use of nudity in art history. First and foremost, just for everyone's awareness, the use of nudity in artwork is prominent from literally the beginning of art being created. It existed in ancient art and is still used today. There are lots of reasons why this is. First and foremost, the human form is beautiful. And I think us as Christians, we sort of have the privilege of understanding that our bodies were created by God, a perfect creator, and that relationship is in particular very beautiful. The human body is expressive. Everyone has one. So it's relatable and it connects a lot of us. Even though we look very different, we all have a body. The human body is used to symbolize human values. So a really good example of this is the image of a mother with her baby. That is a very powerful image that evokes a lot of emotions, whether you are a mom, or maybe you're thinking about your relationship with your mom, or you're thinking about your wife with her child. And lastly, and this is a bit of a more academic approach, but the human body is a very complicated image. And so studying that in art, learning how to depict that accurately, whether that's anatomically or just proportions and that kind of stuff, it makes it a very ideal study to master form, master shape, perspective, depth, shade, light. And so that is why the human body is used in art. I just wanted to make everybody aware of that and understand that I have an expectation that we are adults. I expect you to approach the subject matter with maturity and intellectually appreciate nudity in art. And I think that is possible, that and everybody can find, again, that's this process that I'm laying out about how we look at art applies to the same subject. I will do my best to censor when appropriate, but that may not always be necessary. So if you have any questions or additional concerns, especially regarding this particular artistic theme, please don't hesitate to come talk to me. I am happy to have that conversation. I apologize for the choppy editing for the previous clip. I've been messing with that for way too long, and it seems to be the one sort of transition I can't quite clean up, but we will continue. Another master I wanted to highlight was Rembrandt, who is a portrait artist who primarily used oil paint. He is world and art history renowned regarding his particular skill in oil paint, as well as his realistic depictions of the human form, portrait, and figure, to the point where he shows your flaws, he shows your age, which was a little not taboo, but that would have been a little more scandalous, because a lot of artwork before then was about beauty and idealistic standards, whereas then he portrayed what you look like, what your real face looks like with your wrinkles um, and your aged skin. He, like I mentioned, he was incredibly good with oil paint. If you ever get a chance to see a Rembrandt painting in person, I highly recommend it. He was really, really good at this style called glazing, which is where when you thin down oil paint with oil and medium to the point where it kind of becomes translucent, and rather than painting a solid color, you layer on those sort of glazes. And he was incredible at creating different textures, different fabrics, jewelry with such finite detail using these different skills with oil paint. He painted himself 40 times throughout his entire life, and I just wanted to show a side by side between his younger self versus his older self. You know, you see that progression of age, you see his stature, his posture, and I just think he's an incredible artist. But again, his work shows extremely high levels of skill. He has recognizable images, maybe less recognizable than Michelangelo to many of you, but his pieces have stood the test of time. The why for anybody looking at a piece of artwork is very personal, but just in general, why we look at art, there's a couple of options. You may relate to it if you allow yourself. No matter what, it is a historical artifact from whatever moment in time it was created, which there's context and there's influences that we can a lot of times infer. Like literature or philosophy, it allows you to consider another's perspective on human existence. It gets us out of our own shoes. It's an opportunity for us to see the world from the perspective of another person, which can have a lot of value, whether the goal is to learn or to understand. It is a part of human existence that I would argue a lot of us around the world can benefit from learning the skill of seeing from another person's eyes. And looking at somebody's artwork is a really great way to exercise that skill. And then it's just straightforward. It's potentially meaningful. And it has content. Sometimes it doesn't, back and forth. But ultimately, there is meaning to art. Whether we see it right away or after some self-reflection or critical analyzing, it's a little bit different for everybody. But no matter what, it was created by somebody, there is meaning there. So how should I be looking at artwork? How do I do it right? Because I would argue there is definitely a right and a wrong way to do it. There's two options. You walk up to a piece of art with, in your mind, you're trying to make one decision. Do I like it? Do I not like it? You're closed off from your personal opinions, experiences, that kind of stuff. And you make that decision. I like it. I don't like it. And you move on. You don't get a lot of value out of it. Option 2 is you follow these guidelines. So approach it with an open mind. Allow yourself to get into it. I think a really good example of this is artwork that makes us uncomfortable, invades our space. I personally am pretty biased towards traditional fine art. That just is my personality. That ties back to my training, people who have influenced me, and how I've developed my personal preferences when it's come to fine art. And so more modern pieces, installation artwork, performance artwork, I find that very invasive. It gets in my space. I don't always like that. Again, it's that like or dislike decision that you're making. If that's all I want to do, fine. I won't get any value out of it. But in order to get value out of art, you need to have an open mind and just get into it. Get over it. Experience it. See what might happen. There could be more to it that you just don't understand, whether that's knowing the artist more, knowing their story more, reading more about the piece itself. Give your artist the benefit of the doubt. Remove your bias or assumptions. It's pretty straightforward. Try to understand the work in the context in which it was created, the artist's motives. Knowing art history helps, 100%. And we'll see this as we study through the different eras through the semester. Art history, world events, social constructs based on different times through history, specific art motives, all inform on how we create our artwork. Sorry, excuse me. One thing I want to note with this point is you'll see this as we study ancient art versus modern art. And something in particular about modern artists now is that they do ask a lot of us as viewers. We do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to understanding the artist, understanding their work, rather than it being black and white exactly what it is. Mona Lisa portrait of a woman. Do we know her story entirely? We know little bits and pieces, but we know that it's a portrait. A modern installation piece in the middle of a busy skyscraper, are we going to fully understand what it means? We might, based on the form, based on colors, but we, as the viewer, have to analyze that. And you're not going to do that unless you take the time. You keep an open mind and maybe have that underlying understanding of these different art concepts that we'll be going over this semester. So that's just something I've observed and I've learned, especially when it comes to studying art history versus viewing more modern art. But the concepts are the same. Understand the artist, understand their motives, context. That will also inform you on how to understand the piece of work. Ask yourself why the elements look the way that they do. Process, learning how to manipulate different mediums, different materials, knowing when it's done well versus not well. Does it look good? That comes with education, but understanding that why can help inform, this artist put a ton of time. They put a ton of skill, a ton of learning into their piece. And that can inform on how you value that. And then and only then can you judge its quality. Absolutely. Your knowledge and your perspective will help guide your judgment of the piece. And without that knowledge, that open mind, again, you walk away from that art piece thinking, I liked it, or I didn't like it, and that's it. So what do I want from you to take from all of this information? When I show you the different art pieces that will be presented, as well as observing what we create as a class. These are the steps I want you to take. Look at the work, try to understand it, analyze its form and content, if any, then judge from a position of knowledge and not subjective preference. I'll be honest, if you don't do this, you are not going to have a good time in this class and you're not going to find any value in it. Taking those crucial extra steps to analyze, listen, think through what you're feeling, what your response is, that is where we find value in observing artwork. It tells us a story. It tells us different messages. It shows us humanity in its good and not good spots. I'll even add that having that faith-based perspective, being able to observe art history, I see it as a privilege. We see God's hand through history in lots of different ways, and this is another really great way to do that. So my encouragement to you guys is, as we jump into the art history as a whole, which can be daunting, is to take those extra steps and you will find value. I don't know exactly how, but I guarantee that you will find that value. So the next time you're walking through a museum and you see two dramatically different pieces of work, after this class, my hope for you is that you will be able to properly observe, understand, and learn the skills to analyze artwork, to understand the value of different paintings like The Last Supper versus Andy Warhol's Marilyn. Two very dramatic points in time, different artists, different mediums, but both have their value, and it'll be our job to figure out what that is. So your two main responsibilities before next week: 1, complete a pre-semester questionnaire that's on Canvas. It's essentially designed like a quiz for you. No wrong answers, but it's a questionnaire for you to fill out. It's supposed to help me to kind of gauge your experience with art and art history. That is due Sunday night. That date in particular, so that gives me enough time to review them before next class. I will do my best to send out a reminder, but again, easy points, questionnaire in Canvas, due Sunday night. Second responsibility, get all your drawing supplies. The list for what will be needed next class period is right there on the slide for you, but I highly recommend just getting everything as soon as possible. Again, Hobby Lobby and Amazon, great options for all of those. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, that is all I have for tonight. Thank you again for your patience regarding being online. I'm sure you are all devastated to not be sitting in a desk right now. But thank you for your time. God's blessings on your weekend, and I will see you next week.